Yeah, and Ellen's from tuning in from Spain, which is awesome. We've got several countries represented here. Okay. And we have Kathleen from Washington. Love it. Jessica's here in Oaxaca with me, which is awesome. Lovely, lovely. Okay, guys. Well, it's 10:03 my time. Might be very different your time, but I think we're going to get started just to respect everyone's time. And if someone pops in during the meeting, that is totally fine as well. And that's right, Mackenzie's from Canada. So we have so many different representations here. Okay. Very good. Lots of countries, very international today. So let me go ahead, guys, and get us started. You can let me know when I pull my PowerPoint up if you see it okay. How's volume for everyone? Are we feeling okay with volume? We can do like a thumbs up in the chat, if we're feeling okay about it. Yeah. Okay. And I got Danielle is from Pennsylvania. Awesome. Very, very cool. Okay. We will get started then. So, Jessica says good. Thank you for confirming my volume for me. I appreciate that. Okay, guys. So we are pulling up the PowerPoint to get us started, and we're just inviting a couple more in as we go. Okay, perfect. All right, guys, can we see the PowerPoint okay? Any thumbs up for me? Yes, yes. Okay. I'm getting a little bit of nodding, so that's good. That's good. Perfect. So, Jackie, welcome as well. Awesome. So, we're going over today the role of the nervous system in healing chronic illness. For those of you that know me and have worked with me, I know a lot of you have, the nervous system and its role in chronic illness, but in general, every aspect of our lives is super near and dear to my heart and my own health journey. So, thank you guys so much for those of you that took the time to tune in live. I know there's so many things we could be doing nowadays. So I really, really appreciate you guys taking the time to be here with me. That means so much. And for those of you who are going to be watching the recording back, it also means so much that you're taking the time to watch this. So thank you for being here. I encourage you to really enjoy this time, take advantage of it, also use it for yourself, a space to, reflect.
This is 6:49.
And what I will say, guys, if we
This
do
is more
have
something.
your mic on, I think maybe one
Yeah.
person might want to put themselves on mute because we're getting a little feedback. I think we're
Who's more
good. Um,
because
just to make sure, we will do that. Okay, perfect. And then if we have to come off mute at some point to share or talk, we can do that later on as well. Feel free to use the chat. I'm going to be trying to look at that as much as possible to answer questions or comments that are coming up. You can also put your little Zoom hand up and I will get to that. And then at the end, we'll have time for questions and answers as well. Okay, so no worries, your questions will be attended to. Okay, so before we jump into the material here, I do want to do a brief arrival practice in the respect for our nervous systems, right? That I have a little poem here. So if you want to just take a moment to really settle in where you're at, whether you're in a chair, on a bed, standing up, really just make sure you're centered on your sit bones or your feet. You can feel your connection with the ground or the chair beneath you. Maybe you can put a hand on your heart and your belly button if that feels okay, and just start tuning into the rhythm of your breath today, how it's passing through your body, just kind of observing, checking in with yourself as I go ahead and read our little arrival practice today. So settle in to the here and now. Reach down into the center where the world is not spinning and drink this holy peace. Feel relief flood into every cell. Nothing to do, nothing to be but what you already are. Nothing to receive but what flows effortlessly from the mystery into form. Nothing to run from or run toward. Just this breath, awareness knowing itself as embodiment. Just this breath, awareness waking up to truth. Okay, and just take a couple more seconds to kind of tune into your breath. Let the body kind of relax into that seat and that position you're in a little bit more. Surrender to gravity just a little bit more. And just allow yourself to be here as much as you possibly can. Okay, and really take in this information, take in this space for yourself. And I know a lot of you are here with the motivation to also help clients, loved ones, maybe other people in your life. So thank you for being here and really take advantage of this time. So I do want to start a little bit talking about my own story. Oh, sorry about that, guys. A lot of you know some of it or bits and pieces of it if you do know me and if you've worked with me before. And thank you, Kathleen. Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed the arrival practice. Um, I have my own recovery story, and that involved healing from three different autoimmune diseases, PTSD, and an eating disorder. And as many of you who've been through similar journeys, or you're in the functional health space or integrative health space, you know that a lot of times these things happen together, right? They're not just kind of one isolated random event. We know very deeply that all the systems in the body are connected. So for me, my journey has really been constantly coming back to the nervous system being the foundational piece in my healing journey. And every time I've kind of strayed from that, the universe or whatever, God, whatever you want to call that, has just kind of pulled me back and said, look, you really need to be focusing on that in my own journey and with my clients as well. So it's very, very important to me to share this message. So I will say my own story, my whole life, from the age of about 4, I suffered from digestive issues, not just kind of tummy troubles, but to the point where once, twice, 3 times a year, I was in the emergency room. I was getting endoscopies, colonoscopies from a very young age because they just simply didn't know what was wrong with me in the digestive kind of area. And then as I got older, that started to involve my hormones as I got into high school, migraines, irregular periods, all that good stuff, right? And as I got into college, things got a lot more serious. I started having a lot of these autoimmune based symptoms, which I didn't know what they were at the time, but chronic joint pain, my hair was falling out. I lost my menstrual cycle completely. And when I was going into college, I went through a couple really traumatic events. And that seemed to be this sudden, intense catalyst. And we'll talk kind of more about the physiology and biology of that today. But now, suddenly, I had this rash you can see across my entire face. My body was quite inflamed. I was only 21 in this picture, so you can kind of see the difference now just looking at me. Um, and I couldn't walk one morning when I woke up. I was in so much pain. I couldn't move my neck. I was sleeping 2 to 3 hours a night because I had such terrible insomnia. My hair was falling out. So it was pretty intense. And I eventually did get diagnosed with lupus. And specifically for me, it was really affecting my kidneys and my lungs. So it just got way more serious for me, this question of I can't just keep putting off my health. But at the same time, the message from conventional medicine was, well, this is an autoimmune disease. Like, this is for life. We're just going to give you steroids and more medications. And this is kind of your life trajectory now. So just like adjust accordingly. And I was a 21-year-old girl, right? I had all of these plans. Like, I wanted to travel the world, I wanted to live in other countries. And I went into depression. I did. And we'll talk about how that kind of works with the nervous system and all that today. But at some point, I just said, look, are you going to accept this or are you going to try something else? And I knew about the trauma I had been through. I knew that I was a person who tended towards anxiety and perfectionism. And I'm like, I think I might want to try to work with this whole stress idea and see what that does for my autoimmune disease. So I ended up, to make a long story short, going off. I had to drop out of college at that point. I did end up finishing, but I did have to drop out because I couldn't really do much. I ended up deciding to go to a meditation retreat and just stay there. And it was designed for people who kind of had a lot of health issues as well. So I was with a lot of people with other similar health issues. And meditation, mindfulness is awesome. I love it. But really, the most important thing that I learned at that retreat is in our workbook they gave us. On the second day we were there, there was this diagram of the autonomic nervous system. And it's one of those things that when I saw the diagram and I saw the symptoms and I just connected all the dots in my mind, one of those things that you could never unsee, right? You're like, wait, what? Those are all my symptoms, you know? And now you're telling me this is my nervous system and I actually have control over that. And I was like, my mind was blown, right? 'Cause all these doctors, all these respected professionals telling me you're never going to heal. You know, this is just how it is. And then this little doorway opened for me. So it was a catalyst to my healing. It was quite a journey over these past 9 years to really learn how does one heal the nervous system. Okay, so that's been my own personal and professional journey for the past 9 years. And it's included many, many modalities, many areas of study, working with hundreds and hundreds of clients. But I feel like I have a good system now. So I'm really happy to share with you all today that system, how it's helped me, and how it can hopefully benefit you and your clients as well, people you work with, people you love. Okay, you don't have to be a practitioner to care about this stuff either. Okay. So I do want to take a moment to talk about how the nervous system actually works and how this is related to chronic health conditions specifically today is what we're focusing on, right? So this chart, I know this writing is a little bit small, so I'm actually going to pull up like a bigger version for us to see here. But first, I'm just going to go over the main three states of the nervous system because I think that there's actually even a lot of confusion around this, even for health professionals and people who are taught about this. Okay, and you guys can pop in questions or comments if they come up as we go. But basically, there are three main states of our nervous system. And a lot of us know about this idea of sympathetic, we call fight or flight, and more of the parasympathetic, which is more of rest and restoration. But what a lot of people don't know is that parasympathetic branch actually has two parts. And if we go too far into the parasympathetic branch, we go into something called freeze or collapse. And the kind of scientific academic name is dorsal vagal. But this is a third option that we see with a lot of chronic health conditions. And it is emotional and it's behavioral, but it's also very much physical and reflected in the physiology. So we're going to be talking about that all today. But essentially, the idea is we as humans, our nervous system has evolved for about 500 million years. It evolved from fish 500 million years ago. And the first evolvement or installment of our nervous system was just this dorsal vagal circuit, which is a shutdown circuit, which is collapse. So we still have this alive in our nervous systems today. How do we know? People who deal with fainting, people who, when they see blood, they suddenly pass out, right? Or people who go through a traumatic event or a really emotional event and they pass out. Okay, that is at the top of the ladder. That is the collapse response of the nervous system. And it was actually designed with this biological intention that if the animal was going to die, that fainting, that collapsing would prevent it from feeling the pain of actually the death, the physical death. So if you think about it, our nervous system, again, it's always trying to protect us. It has this very, very, very long evolutionary history of protection. But at the same time, sometimes that's maladaptive in our modern day environment. Okay. So that is the collapse response. Now, after the collapse response, we came to another installment of the nervous system, which was our sympathetic nervous system. So this was the ability to basically defend ourselves, to be aggressive if we needed to be aggressive, if we needed to fight, to run away if we needed to run away. And when you think about survival of the human species, that those were really important skills to have in kind of this animal world, right? So that evolved about 400 million years ago. And then the last installment of our nervous system was actually what we call ventral vagal, our social engagement system. So this was when we were actually looking to be more of a social species and say, oh, we actually want to form like long-term social relationships and we want to work together for the better of the human species. So this guy came online, and it's very much dictated by curiosity, being in the present moment, being compassionate. And physically, it's where all our systems in our body are working optimally as well. So what you'll see as we go through this is that behavioral and emotional aspect lines exactly with certain physiological states of the body, which is why we see so clearly with chronic health conditions. It's very rare that you find someone with autoimmune disease, with chronic digestive disorders, and they say, oh, but I feel awesome. I feel great. I'm super socially connected. I'm never anxious, right? That's actually, I've never met a client like that in my life. These things go hand in hand. And I think that in our own experience, our own healing journeys with people we love, we see this very much as well. And what I'm doing is simply giving you the scientific explanation of why that is and connecting the dots. But I think a lot of us know this intuitively as well from our lived experience. Okay. So, any questions up until there about the three different main states of the nervous system? See, I don't see any hands or notes, so I think I'll keep going, guys. And like I said, feel free to ask questions. I want you guys to kind of be on the same page as me. So if we want to stop to explain something, we can do that. Okay. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to pull up a bigger version of this chart because I want you to be able to read more about the physiological kind of symptoms that go with nervous system dysregulation. So you can see, and there's this little writing here. I know it's small, guys. I apologize, but we can always go back and watch the recording as well. So in the ventral vagal state, you saw the emotions, you saw the behavioral state, but what happens in our bodies physiologically? Well, digestion increases, intestinal mobility increases, resistance to infection. So the immune system is working at its optimal level, and it can go into that rest and recuperation stage at night when it's meant to. Circulation is on board, it's working. So just a note, you might experience this in yourself or with your clients. Before I did my nervous system work, my hands and feet were freezing. And there were times when I would go out into the cold because I'm from Michigan and I would need like 3 hours to heat my body up again. Why? Because my circulation was so offline. It was in these other states, which we'll talk about, which doesn't allow for the blood flow to actually get to those extremities. Okay, so it can be kind of just the hands and feet, but in more extreme cases, it can actually implicate like problems regulating your temperature. Okay, yeah, and Jessica said she's experienced that as well. So, exactly, I think a lot of us have seen that. Another thing that comes online with the ventral vagal is oxytocin. And we'll talk more about this in the context of the female nervous system, which is something that literally no one's talking about. How the female nervous system is actually different than the male nervous system. We will talk a little bit about that today because, as you notice, everyone here is female. Fun fact, 46 people registered for this webinar, one male, 45 females. Okay, guys, so I think females, women, let's go, right? We're really invested in integrative health and we really intuitively understand the role of emotional health in the nervous system. So props to you guys. Okay. So oxytocin is the neurotransmitter it's actually a neuromodulator is the proper term for it, but it's involved in social bonds. So you might know this in the context of like mother and child. It's super important. It's super important in romantic relationships and just any social relationships. Actually, oxytocin is really important and it's the main neuromodulator that determines the functions of the female nervous system. So we'll get more into that in the future. But that's super important for us as women to understand that when we're out of this zone, our nervous system suffers from a higher level of physiological distress as well. So yeah, and then it decreases all of those defensive responses. So what are the defensive responses? We get more threat sensing. Any threats, they can be external or internal threats, and we go into now sympathetic mode. So this is what a lot of us call fight or flight. It's a little bit more complex than that, which I'll talk a tiny bit about today. But this is where our blood pressure increases, our heart rate increases. What our body wants to do is bring more glucose into the blood to make it available for us to run away or to fight. So we get glucose pumping into our blood. If we have chronic sympathetic activation, hello prediabetes, hello insulin resistance, right? Because we have chronic glucose pumping into the blood when we don't need it. We have adrenaline. We have oxygen circulation only to vital organs. So suddenly now I have cold hands, cold feet, because that's not so important. The nervous system is saying, I need to survive. I don't really care about your hands and feet right now, right? And of course, it's also taking resources away from our liver, from our digestive system, and our immune system. Because it says, look, if we're going to die, if the tiger is going to eat us in 5 minutes, I don't care if your liver is working properly or your immune system or your digestive system. It's not important to me. I need those resources to pump to your heart and to get your lungs going and your muscles so that you can run away and maybe survive this attack, right? And that's fine if we're actually being chased by a tiger. That's lovely. But now in our modern day lives, at least in my situation, I'm not often being chased by a tiger or a bear, luckily. So I don't really need this response so much. However, it's still present and it gets activated by so many things, which we'll talk about. And what decreases here? Insulin activity. So for those of us who work in the health sphere, insulin is what actually allows the glucose to go into the cell. So if insulin activity decreases, what do we get? High blood sugar, right? Because the glucose is in the blood and it can't get in the cell. It decreases digestion. Okay, so hello SIBO because digestion isn't working properly. Hello IBS. Hello bloating, acid reflux, right? Because that digestive process is being disrupted. It's going to decrease salivation and all that kind of all salivary glands in your body. So it can lead to a lot of dryness, dry mouth. If you guys notice that in yourselves, dry eyes, it has to do with your nervous system. It decreases relational ability, okay? Because if we're trying to survive, we don't really care if we're making good social relationships. Our nervous system's like, sorry, man, we just got to survive. I don't really care about having a good relationship with you right now, long term. And it decreases the immune response. So we're more likely to get gut infections, viral infections, all of that lovely stuff, right? Now, if the threat response keeps going and our body's sensing that the threat is still active, we will actually go into this dotted line is called a freeze response. And a freeze response is actually a mixed state between the blue collapse and the red sympathetic. And this is where we have a lot of motivation and activation in our body to run away or fight, but we're starting to transition into immobility. So our body freezes. And this state feels terrible because it's all this chronic activation in your body with nowhere to go. It's like, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this, but I can't. I'm stuck. I need to do this, but I'm stuck. I can't. And it's this exhausting process that your body and your mind are in all day because you need to do so many things. You want to do so many things, but it's also saying it's not safe to move. It's not safe to move. Don't move. So it basically physically and mentally and emotionally freezes you. Okay. And if that keeps going, then we can go into more of the depression and the numbness and the dissociation into that blue, that what we call collapse immobility. And this is where the fuel storage actually increases. We're trying to conserve energy resources. So in energy conservation, this state, when it goes on for a very long time, it's like if you work with clients and you see they actually now have low cortisol, this is very much reflective of this state because now they've used up so many of these resources, but their body still feels like they're in a threat. So it says the best thing we can do is go into energy conservation mode. And we're going to decrease our heart rate. We're going to decrease our temperature, our blood pressure, all of that. We're not going to care about relationability. We're not going to really care so much about the immune response because we're just trying to maintain little energy to stay alive as long as we can, right? It's not prioritizing any sort of long-term health in that state. And this is often the state where we do see people with chronic fatigue and autoimmune conditions coming in. Okay, or like long COVID, those long-term viral illnesses, a lot of it has to do with freeze and the collapse response of the body. Okay, so just keeping that all in mind. So, that is what I wanted to share for you guys. I wanted to go in a little bit deeper on the fine print there. Now, what I want to do before we move on with the PowerPoint is I want you guys to just do a quick exercise with me. So, for those of you that are following along, what I would love for you to do right now is if it feels comfortable, just find your seat again. Lightly close your eyes if that feels okay for you today. Feel in to your body and your breath again. And I want you to bring to mind right now a time in the past couple weeks that you were in that green zone, ventral vagal, social zone. Just bring that image, bring that memory to your mind and to your body. Maybe think about where were you? Who are you with? What are you doing? Really bring all the senses in. What do you see? And then start tuning into your body and your breath. In this moment of the green zone, of ventral vagal, what is the breath like? Is it shallow? Is it longer? Can I get all the way down to that belly, that diaphragm? What is my body like? Am I able to relax a little bit more in this state and not have my shoulders kind of clenching up and wearing them as earrings? Am I able to fall back a little bit more in my chair? Okay. Just kind of take in what it's like to be in a ventral vagal green state for a second, okay? And enjoy that and feel, I really want you to feel, what does this feel like in my body so that I remember it, okay? Once you feel like you have remembered that one and you've got that embodied, you know what it's like in your body and your breath, I want you now to bring up a memory in the past couple weeks where we were in more of a sympathetic mode. Okay, so we were in more of anger, maybe fear, anxiety, maybe frustration, worry. Okay, and just gently bring that memory into the body, into the breath, into the mind, illustrate it. Think, what am I wearing? Who am I with? What am I doing? Bring in your senses. What am I seeing? What am I hearing? What am I feeling? And then start tuning internally to the body. What is the body's posture in this moment? What is the breath like in this moment? Is it long and flowing, or is it getting a little bit more shallow in that chest area, in that neck area? Is it flowing through or is it getting stuck? Right? Think about the body. Am I suddenly tensing up? Am I contracting in? Okay, and just remember this. Again, take a moment to kind of bring it in, not just to the cognitive memory, but to the body memory as well. Okay. And once you got that, last step, guys, will be bringing it into a blue zone, a dorsal freeze or collapse memory. And I want you to be careful with this. I don't want to bring anyone into any sort of um, reaction or space. So just gently, if it feels okay for you today, if it doesn't, don't do it. This is always an invitation. But bring into a memory, into your mind, if it feels okay, an image of when I felt more frozen or more collapsed or shut down. When I felt more of that numbness, that helplessness, trapped, okay, shame. And just see what happens with the breath. See, let your body take on that posture. What is the posture of that helplessness and shame? What does it look like in the body? Am I kind of caving in on myself? Am I maintaining my straight back, my open posture? Or is my body wanting to kind of cave in and conserve energy and shorten the breath? Okay, just notice that. Take it in just for a moment. Okay. Um, and let that sink in so you remember it. Okay? And after we feel good about that exercise, I'm going to invite you guys who had eyes closed to gently bring eyes open again, wiggle fingers, wiggle toes, feel your seat in the chair, bring yourself back to the current moment. And I want to talk a little bit about the exercise. I do have a question from Danielle that I want to answer. Um, Danielle, are you able to pop on? Let's see. Danielle Ford.
Yes.
Okay, perfect, Danielle. I want to talk about the fawn response. And I
Yeah.
am going to talk about it a little bit more in another part of the class as well. Okay, but it's
Oh, okay.
especially important for the female nervous system, so I do want to talk about it. Okay, can you see the chart again, Danielle?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so the fawn response is what we call a blended response. It's a blend of the sympathetic and dorsal vagal. And it mimics social engagement. So, for those of you who aren't familiar with the fawn response, it is an attachment-based survival strategy. And the evolutionary purpose was, well, maybe if I can kind of please or appease this person, they won't cause me harm. And we see this response being way more common with women due to that influence of oxytocin in our system and wanting to be more socially kind of accepted and cared for, just biologically. And basically, what this is there's a lot of sympathetic and activation in the fawn response where we're always attuning to other people outside of ourselves first. Because what do you need? What do you need? What do I need to do so I make you happy? What do I need to do so I make you happy? But it's also freezing, right? Because we're letting our own biological, physiological, emotional needs go to the wayside because we're so hyper attuned to our partner and this guy and this woman and I don't know this random person who wants me to do this that our personal needs have to go to the wayside. Okay, and that's actually, it sounds just kind of like, oh, you're a people pleaser. Yeah, but that can also become very physically dangerous, right? When we start constantly neglecting our own needs, in that hyper attunement to what do you need from me? What do you need? I need your approval, otherwise I'm not okay, right? And this is very deeply ingrained into the female nervous system. Okay, just because of all of the intergenerational trauma and the way that women have been socialized and our biology of the oxytocin dominant nervous system, right? And I say that it mimics the social engagement because what it does is our body uses those social cues of, oh, I'm going to smile and I'm going to use this high voice, right? And yeah, of course I can do that, no problem. But that is a behavioral strategy, right? It's not actually being in the social engagement system. Okay. Does that make sense, Danielle?
Yes, thank you very much for that.
You're welcome. Yeah, and that's really important because it's one that often gets overlooked, especially with women, because they're so good at hiding their own stress and their own needs. That I think even to ourselves, we're really good at hiding our own stress and, neglecting our own needs and realizing when things are they're not working for us and when relationships aren't working for us. So, I'm glad you brought that up. Okay. Anyone else wanting to share any reflections on the exercise, anything they noticed, or any questions? See, give it a second. If no one has any questions or comments, that's totally fine. And you guys know too that if you're watching this back, if you're watching this live right now, you guys can always reach out to me, right? Because this stuff is really important to me. So I want to make sure you get any questions answered. Okay, anything that's coming up. Um, and yeah, just trying to remember really what your body and breath feels like in those different states. Because in the most basic ways, we want to start taking our own inventory of what's going on in our body um, several times throughout the day to start to really notice what is truly going on with my nervous system. Okay. Okay, so that's an invitation. I have a note here from Jessica. So yeah, that makes sense. Really I like that word fragmented that you used during the sympathetic and collapse during parasympathetic. And yeah, and that social element allows us to be more expansive and we feel that not just in how we talk, but even in the body, right? There's like this opening in the body. And now I can actually breathe because I'm opening up the rib cage and I'm getting into the diaphragm and the breath can actually flow through my body, which is so physiologically important. And sympathetic is like so much energy. There's so much energy pumping through, and there's not necessarily a place for it to go. And that's why we can start feeling a little bit fragmented or distracted or frazzled in that state. And I see a lot of clients in that chronic sympathetic as well. Like, oh, I'll take 20 supplements, like I'll do these 20 new dietary routines, I'll hire 6 different coaches. But I won't actually slow down to reflect and see if any of this is working or how it actually feels in my body. Right. And it's nothing against them. I'm not making fun of anyone. I was there for several years. Right. It's just the reality of recognizing that and recognizing can't heal in that kind of state. Right. We simply cannot heal physically, mentally, emotionally in a chronic sympathetic state or dorsal. Okay. So thank you guys so much for sharing and for your questions. I really appreciate that. I'm gonna keep going, but if more comes up as we go, you guys jump in. Okay, no worries. So I want to talk also about how nervous system states can correlate to certain types of behaviors when it comes to health coaching as well and to life in general, even if we're not health coaches, right? Just being humans, that's a thing. So let me see. Can you guys see that okay? We're good? And the slideshow? Yes. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So, oh, we went back to the beginning. We don't want to do that, guys. So, let's talk a little bit about behavior. What happens with a dysregulated nervous system? So, if we find that someone's more in the fight flight or that freeze, because remember that freeze is a combination of fight or flight and collapse, we see these behaviors a lot. So, we see a lot of overwhelm and avoiding. We see a lot of self-sabotage because it's like, oh, I want to move towards this. I want to make this change in my life. But I'm also it doesn't feel safe to make changes. My nervous system doesn't want to change anything. So it's like this frozenness that keeps us stuck from actually going into making those changes. And that contributes to like procrastination as well. And it's a lot of that overwhelm feeling like there's just so many things for me to do, but so I'm just not going to do anything. Okay. And then, especially when we're more sympathetic dominant, we love those quick fixes because our body's just burning through energy. And the message that's being sent up from our body to our brain is like, we need more glucose. We need more energy. We need to survive. So now we have like sugar cravings, caffeine cravings. I want my dopamine fix. So I want to scroll on social media, all of that kind of stuff, right? to get that activation and to sustain that activation. Okay, so we can see this a lot, and we can definitely see how this disrupts sometimes for our clients, for health coaches or health practitioners, definitely disrupts their plans for how they're healing and their wellness plans. If we're just, people, this disrupts our, if we're trying to heal mentally, emotionally, physically, right? Any sort of goal. It doesn't allow us to really continue on in that process because we have to constantly attend to our nervous system first. Your nervous system has been around for 500 million years. You're never going to outsmart it. And that's why I always tell people, you think you can, you can't. Which is why I don't like this terminology nowadays of hacking the nervous system. You're not hacking a 500 million year old system. I'm sorry. But your, whatever magical supplement is not going to overcome this chronic level of dysregulation. Okay. And then if we're chronically in dorsal vagal, what do we experience? More memory loss, brain fog, because the prefrontal cortex goes offline. That blood flow is directed away, largely from the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for planning, remembering, organizing. So we can get really foggy. It will often lead to strategies to numb. So this is where we see a lot of alcoholism, binging, overeating, any sort of numbing behaviors. There's a lot of numbing behaviors out there. And again, part of my model and part of why I'm so passionate about this work, whether we're talking about someone recovering from chronic illness, recovering from alcoholism, any sort of addiction, PTSD, anxiety, it's honestly, those are just names. They're just names that we've given them medically to be able to diagnose them. But all they are different states of dysregulation in the nervous system. And I find that when people understand this and they feel this, it's so freeing because it's like, oh, wow, I'm not broken. Nothing's wrong with me, right? This is just my natural physiological, biological, human survival response. And I just have to learn to speak that language of my body and my nervous system again and retrain it that I'm actually safe right now. And then I can come into regulation. Okay. And in ventral vagal, we are able to focus more. It's where those healthy choices for our mental, physical, emotional health, they actually become more in reach and possible. They don't feel like you're asking me to leap from one mountain to the next. It might feel challenging, but it feels doable, right? And this regulation will reduce all of those survival-driven patterns that we previously discussed. Okay. Now, I also want to take a moment to talk about where you guys came here from, right? The nervous system as the root of chronic illness. And you're probably already catching on, right, with why that is. So I know that you guys are really smart and you're probably already connecting the dots. Um, but let's talk about these different areas because maybe you or people you work with or people you loved have experienced digestive issues, female hormone issues, thyroid issues, immune issues, blood sugar issues, or maybe all of them, right? I've been in all of them, so I'm an overachiever, right? Um, so at a basic level, when our nervous system is in survival physiology, our body shifts resources from long-term healing, long-term relationships into short-term survival. What do I need to survive? And this creates a ripple effect in the digestive system, the immune system, the hormonal system, because most of those systems are based on long-term objectives, not just in the next 15 minutes of survival. When it comes to the digestive system, we know that the gut is highly, almost entirely regulated by the vagus nerve. So if we're more in a sympathetic and freeze state, what we'll see there is that blood flow is not coming into the digestive system. Enzyme production is not prioritized. So if you work in health, again, you'll see that people have trouble digesting and actually absorbing their nutrients when they're in that chronic sympathetic state. This often leads to bloating, reflux, and malabsorption again of those key nutrients we need to survive. And if we're more in dorsal, You will notice more slow motility. That can be part of the freeze response as well, constipation. But when we're moving into dorsal, it can become chronic constipation. I've had people who go to the bathroom, number two, right, once a week, um, who are more in dorsal. And this is where you start seeing more of those like inflammatory bowel diseases and disorders coming on because that stool is sitting there and fermenting. And for those of you that are in the health field, you know that causes this fermentation of the bacteria. It allows this environment where the gut microbiome becomes completely out of balance and completely inflamed as a result, leading to these autoimmune conditions, sometimes in the gut, or just chronic inflammation. Okay. Now, let me take a second to talk about the immune system and autoimmunity as well. So when we're in sympathetic, we originally will get that weakened immune system, and it just makes us more vulnerable to virus, viral illness, parasites, bacteria, fungal infections. So this is the person where it's like maybe you're working with them on their gut and they've been through like 20 gut protocols and it just something new just keeps coming back. And it's like, okay, so now we have the parasites, now we have a bacterial infection, and now we have a yeast infection, right? It's like that's a key that they're in a chronic sympathetic state. And then once we go more into dorsal, which could be long-term sympathetic, pushes us into dorsal and shutdown, or it could just be a serious traumatic event that automatically brings us into dorsal, energy conservation, blue zone. This can often actually lead to a hyperactivation of the immune system where we get autoimmunity. Because what happens is the body now has so little supply of those stress hormones and those resources that it goes into energy conservation. And on a nervous system level, it says, well, it's actually more, it makes more sense for me to just chronically maintain survival physiology rather than come out of it. Because even though I have so few resources, I'm still under threat. So I still need to protect myself, but actually switching out and back into survival physiology is energetically costly. So it's more important for me just to chronically stay in this low level survival response. And that is where the immune system begins to dysfunction. Okay, so the body can start to attack its own tissues, more inflammation, and so on. In the context of female hormones, as some of you may know, when we have a preference for stress hormones and cortisol and adrenaline, which happens in that sympathetic activation, that's going to trade off with our main regulating female hormone for those of us who are still in those menstrual years of the cycling years of progesterone. And the cortisol production is going to basically suppress the progesterone production. So we're going to have irregular periods, we're going to have delayed ovulation, more likeliness to get PMS, infertility issues, all of that kind of stuff. And then if we go into dorsal, this is commonly where people will completely lose their cycle due to that energy conservation. And in the context of perimenopause or menopause, it completely throws off that estrogen to progesterone ratio in the process of getting into menopause. So it does create much more intensity of those symptoms of things like the hot flashes, the headaches, the migraines, the mood swings, and all of that. Okay. And of course, it also affects testosterone. It also affects estrogen. But I just mentioned progesterone because it's kind of one that's on our minds a lot with our clients. And in women, as a woman, we're oftentimes thinking about that. And yes, and then we also want to talk about thyroid hormones, right? A lot of women and a lot of people in general nowadays are hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's, right? All this stuff. So here's what happens with the thyroid. The stress response of the nervous system, when it's chronically activated, blocks the conversion of the inactive form of the thyroid hormone T4 to the active form T3. And basically, we now have no active thyroid hormone. So we start going into potentially hypothyroidism. And then with the connection of the autoimmunity, when we go into more of that dorsal and collapse phase, we can actually get Hashimoto's. as a result, right? So for those of you who don't know, Hashimoto's is autoimmune thyroid disease, okay, where the body's attacking the thyroid gland itself. So it will go there. And finally, the last thing I'll talk about, not to go too scientific on you guys, is the blood sugar picture and insulin. So we already kind of talked about this with the chart, but when we're in sympathetic, we have a lot of glucose being pumped into the bloodstream, but insulin activity goes down. So we essentially have no place for that glucose to go. We get high blood sugar, prediabetes, insulin resistance. Dorsal vagal also, once we get pushed into that state, is going to push up our intensity of things like our fatigue and our cravings. So it's going to cause this further intensity of that dysregulation of blood sugar because we just feel like we need energy to get through the day to survive. Unfortunately, because insulin isn't working correctly a lot of times in those situations, we're getting this dysregulation pattern that blood glucose is sometimes staying in our blood for too long. And then also we're getting blood sugar peaks and drops. So we get energy peak and drop and mood peak and drop. And our whole body feels like we're going through a roller coaster sometimes. Okay, so that is for that, the roots of certain chronic illnesses. And I could probably go on all day, right? But I want to keep this to that 90-minute mark that I discussed, so I won't go any deeper there. But I do want to ask you guys if there's comments or questions on what we've gone over so far. I can see the chat here. And it's okay if you don't have a comment or question, it's not mandatory. But just checking. I'm not seeing anything pop. Oh, I did see one here. Okay. So thank you, Lisa. And so happy that you're here. Thank you for joining. So yeah, I did want to give you guys that detail because I know that a lot of us here are, in fact, health practitioners and coaches or dealing with our own health issues. And it's great to keep it surface level and just say, oh, well, this causes dysregulation and dysregulation causes all this stuff. But I really wanted to give you guys more of the hard science there. Okay. So now let's keep going to really, so what causes dysregulation? Good question. Why are our nervous systems so dysregulated in the first place? And part of what I want to do with this is really clear the stigma with the word trauma because some people don't resonate with that word, but trauma is really just another word for overwhelm. Okay, trauma is another word for overwhelm. And it's not an event. It's not about an event. It's about how that event, that thing that happened, was simulated in the nervous system and how it was perceived by your body physiologically. Okay, so it's not about, oh, that wasn't such a big deal. No, it's how your body is perceiving it for you based on your history, your intergenerational history, your physiology, so many things. Okay, so it's not about shaming anyone and it's not about, oh, you're so weak, you're so strong. It's nothing about that. Okay, it's biological, it's physiological. Okay, so what causes dysregulation? Chronic stress. Hello, welcome to the 21st century, right? Mental stress, emotional stress, physical stress. A lot of people don't realize if you're injured, if you're chronically ill, that is a huge amount of stress on your nervous system. Okay, so it's gonna go into some state of dysregulation because of that. Yes, and I just see a couple people chiming in. No worries if you need to pop out. I'm sending the recording. Um, and you can watch that, Angelique, and I will give more master classes in the future, so no worries. And Danielle, yes, some people call it big T and little t. I tend to stay away sometimes from that language because I never want to make someone feel like a certain event was not as a big of deal as what it's big T trauma. You know what I mean? So I totally know what you're saying, and I think it can be helpful to kind of be like, oh, well, that was, just kind of realizing that the little things add up, but also making sure that you guys know no one can tell you what was traumatic for you or not. Okay, that was how your own body and nervous system interpreted it. Okay, and you taking that agency back into your body is really important to me. Okay, and so also acute trauma, car accidents. Maybe we were in some sort of natural disaster, medical trauma. Maybe we lost a loved one. Maybe we had a really intense divorce or breakup. that is acute trauma for your nervous system, okay? Developmental trauma, right? How I was raised doesn't mean that my parents were necessarily abusive, but just kids have so many needs. It's very rare that a child gets 100% of their needs met by their parents. So there is adaptations in the attachment system, which we'll talk a little bit about, that can lead to chronic dysregulation of the nervous system as well. Intergenerational trauma. We now know from epigenetics that your nervous system, so your nervous system is actually formed of the blueprint of your mother's nervous system. But we know that we can now track this back 3 generations, that traumatic events that happened for your great grandparents are still going to affect the development of your own nervous system. And there's different types of studies on that we can talk about if we want to, okay, or if anyone's interested. And medical trauma, I already mentioned, and birth trauma. Giving birth can be extremely traumatic, okay? Also, being born can be extremely traumatic. And the thing about these types of traumas is that we don't remember them cognitively. So people often say, oh, well, I don't know, so something's just wrong with me, right? My nervous system's just like always in sympathetic. There's always a reason why. The body, the nervous system just doesn't do stuff for, to have fun, to just to goof off. There's always a reason why. So even the way we came into this world, the way we're born, can have an effect on how our nervous system develops. And you might say, gosh, well, how do I reprogram that? Well, that's why the somatic work is so important, because it's not about the story here. It's about actually reprogramming from a nervous system based level, not the cognitive based level. Because the cognitive based level is never going to be able to access these type of memories that we call implicit memories. And these are essentially body-based memories that are remembered by movements, by breath patterns, and by nervous system states. So a lot of times we might have random images or associations with certain places or people that remind us of certain things, but we might not cognitively remember it, which is why traditional talk therapy and mindset work and all that stuff, it often misses the mark for actually long-term healing of the nervous system. Okay. So, all that being said, I do want to talk about the vagus nerve. I'm sure we've all heard about it if we're on social media, if we're on TikTok, right? We've heard of the vagus nerve by now. It gets a lot of press, but again, I think a lot of times when that happens, there's a lot of misunderstanding too about what it actually does, right? So, the vagus nerve is oftentimes framed in neuroscience as the power cord between your brain stem and the rest of your body. So it's essentially determining at a very basic level how much kind of power activation we need to be in certain states of the nervous system. That brain stem area is where that survival brain is housed, is located. Sometimes it's also referred to as the reptilian brain. Okay. So the vagus nerve is the 10th cranial nerve. And the most important thing I want you to remember about the vagus nerve is 80% of the fibers come from the body to the brain. So when we're trying to reprogram the nervous system and heal the nervous system, we can talk here all day and do all this cognitive work and we can like list our affirmations and all that stuff. But that's 20%. Okay? If we're not getting into the 80%, which is actually working with the body, working with the breath patterns, working with the nervous system states at that level, you're missing 80% of the equation. Okay, so this is why I find the somatic work to be so essential, which is the methodology that I use. And I also incorporate neuroscience because it's really important to know how all this stuff works. But if we're just thinking about stuff all day, we're never getting past that cognitive neocortex of the brain to that survival brain. That's why the nervous system is referred to as being subcortical. Okay, it's here at the brain stem. And the only way to access it is actually working through the body. Okay. So more on the vagus nerve, because I know you guys are science lovers like me, so I'm going to get specific so that you can explain this also to other people in your life, your clients, whoever you need to explain it to. So the vagus nerve actually acts as like a brake. And let me explain that a little bit more. It acts as a brake on our heart rate and our stress response. So when we're in that green zone, when we're in ventral vagal, what it does is it's like when you're in a car and you're pulling up to a red light and you just kind of gently put your foot on the brake and you gently come to a stop. The vagal brake is actually putting a brake on the sympathetic nervous system. If we did not have the vagal brake, we would constantly be in survival physiology, and that's actually how you know, our ancestors before we were actually humans, right? That's how they lived, like wild animals, constantly in survival physiology. What the vagal brake does is allow us to ease into ventral, into the green zone. Say, oh, okay, we can gently slow our heart rate down. We can have more awareness of our environment, more awareness of social cues, and we can come into this deep, regulated, safe place. So this is why it's really important that we have what's referred to as high vagal tone. Okay, so high vagal tone helps that vagal brake know when it needs to brake to bring us into ventral vagal, when it needs to ease off the brake to bring in more of that survival response, because sometimes we do need it. If a car's coming at us, we want to get out of the way, right? But it also needs to know when to not brake too hard. So just to give you guys kind of some simple metaphors here, if we release the brake completely, that's like imagine the car like running through the red light, like it's an emergency. Let's go, activation. Okay, let's go, ready to fight or run away. But there's also something else that can happen, which is slamming on the brake. So if we go through a majorly overwhelming event, a traumatic event, we might have this misinterpretation of the nervous system that's like, let's slam on the brake. And that leads to dorsal shutdown, that blue zone, which is like I overbraked it, right? I went too deep into the parasympathetic zone. Okay. And now I'm in more of fatigue and dissociation and brain fog and chronic energy conservation mode, which feels terrible to live that way. So, our goal with nervous system work is to restore healthy vagal tone so that we have flexibility. We don't want to always be in the green zone all day because sometimes we actually do need a little bit of sympathetic activation, right, to do certain things. We might even need that blue zone if we're in a if we're recovering from a chronic illness, for example, or from surgery. We need to rest. We just need to lay down and we need to be fatigued and we need to restore. But we don't want to get stuck in those zones. And that's the key problem we see. We want your nervous system to be able to flow in and out and be able to come back very quickly. So it's like, even if I had a very difficult illness, physical event, or I had a very terrible emotional event, I want to be able to go through a recovery process and come back to ventral vagal relatively quickly. I don't want to get stuck in the sympathetic or in the dorsal. And that happens when we have low vagal tone. Okay. And this is also for your kind of health practitioners here. This is low HRV, right? HRV is essentially heart rate variability. For those of you that aren't familiar with the term, is how we measure vagal tone. And that you can see that on your Apple Watch, right, on your Oura Ring. When we have low HRV, we usually correlate that to lower vagal tone, lower stress resilience, lower flexibility of the nervous system. Okay. So again, I know that was a lot. Some of you might know more about this already than others, so it's okay. You don't have to know all this stuff, right? I'm going in pretty deep here just to give you guys more of the scientific explanation as well, okay? And if you have questions, feel free to pop in with questions, okay? So you might say, okay, this is great information. I'm liking all of this. So how do I start with myself in a very basic way? How do I start working with my nervous system? Right? So I already kind of hinted at this. But what I want to do is introduce you to the first exercise that I will often introduce to the clients I work with, which is 4-point check-ins. And we have to do the check-ins several times a day because the vagus nerve needs a lot of feedback. Your nervous system needs a lot of feedback. Every second, the nervous system is already checking 6 times for safety or danger in your environment. 6 times every second, right? So it's really helpful if we can do these micro check-ins every couple hours even. And they only have to take 2 minutes, right? They don't have to take a bunch of time. It can be super informal. But basically what you do is you pause. You first check in with the rhythm of your breath. Is it shallow between the chest and here? That's more sympathetic. Is it going all the way down to the belly? Is it flowing nicely? Right? That's more of the green zone. Or does it feel like I'm maybe holding my breath or I'm not really getting enough air? More of the blue zone. Okay, so we first check in on the breath. Then we check in on the body. How does my body feel? Am I contracted? Am I bracing? Am I more relaxed and ready to engage and open? Or am I kind of collapsing in on myself? Right? And you can see that collapsing is more of our blue dorsal. The bracing, the tension is more of our sympathetic. And then if I'm just open and I'm sitting up straight and I'm, ready to engage, but I'm not bracing, right? That's more of the ventral vagal. So we check in on the body. The third is checking in on, in this picture, are any emotions present? And I do this order specifically because I want you to start to see how emotions actually come through the body and breath before they come into cognitive awareness. So the more you do this, you start to kind of catch the emotional stimulus before it becomes, intense and overwhelming. So you might go into your breath in your body and you notice, oh, wow, I'm kind of contracted in here. My breath's kind of short. Oh, I am actually feeling kind of anxious, right? I'm kind of worried about what's going on at, work or with my family today. Okay. And then the fourth is the thoughts. So not analyzing every thought in your mind, but rather what type of thoughts am I having? Are they very like future based? Are they worrying thoughts, anxious thoughts, angry thoughts? Are they more in the present moment, more kind of reasonable, more kind of realistic, not overly positive, but not overly negative? Or are these thoughts going into a little bit of hopelessness and a little bit of, oh, nothing's going to work, right? Just that mode of like, no, I'm giving up. Nothing's going to work, right? Everything's just kind of, hopeless. That would be more of the blue zone. So you start to do this 4-point check-in. And what does this get us to? This starts to get us to making neuroception, understanding the state of our nervous system. It brings us from the unconscious, the subconscious, to the conscious awareness of our brain, our cognitive brain, where we actually have the possibility to reflect on that and start to work with it, right? If it's unconscious and we never do anything about it, it's never going to change. Okay, so it's bringing the unconscious and subconscious to your conscious mind. And you start to realize, oh, wow, I'm in sympathetic again. I'm in sympathetic. I'm in sympathetic. So the first step of the check-in is these 4 steps and deciding, so what nervous system state am I in right now? And I always emphasize with my clients, it's 2 parts. It's understanding where I'm at, bringing in the awareness, and you go through all 4 steps before you actually change anything. You practice just being with and observing all of that before you change it. And the second part is asking, what do I need to help my nervous system feel safe right now? What do I need to help bring it back closer to the green zone? Okay, and it can be super simple. I'm just giving you quick examples of neural exercises that you might have tried and you might have liked in the past. Maybe it's like you implement a mini breathing exercise or a tapping exercise. You go for a 5-minute walk outside. You do a tiny bit of movement. You just get up and stretch. You drink a glass of water. Maybe you reach out to someone, you talk to a friend. Or maybe you just have literally 30 seconds and you just put your hand on your heart and you take 3 deep breaths. Okay, it's these mini micro things that start to give different feedback to your nervous system to start to slowly but surely rewire the baseline states. Okay. And increase vagal tone over time too. And of course, I'm just giving you some really basic examples here of things you might already know. But there's many, many, many different ways and things and processes we can use here. It's just kind of giving you a quick example of what you can just get started with today. Okay. So this is a really important thing I want to emphasize is that a lot of what we see on social media is really focused on just bringing calm or in the moment regulation to the nervous system. So I see a lot of practitioners also just telling their clients, oh, we'll just do some breathing exercises. Just download the Calm app. Sure. Like we mentioned, if you are consistent with that, it will help to slowly bring you closer to ventral state over time. But the truth is, it's missing certain pieces of the puzzle that are actually built into the way your nervous system works. So it's more those mini tools on their own without any further process or education or methodology, they will bring short-term relief, but they might not bring long-term neuroplastic changes, which is where we actually reteach the nervous system safety and regulation. And in order to do that, we have to work with other processes outside of just mindfulness-based practices or breath practices or going to yoga class. We need to work with something called interoception. This is a part of the neuroception of our nervous system state. It's actually learning how to work with your internal body signals. So learning how to work with the breath, learning how to work with posture, learning how to work with the body through micro exercises is how we start to retrain the interoception, the internal sensing of your nervous system. You're not going to find that on apps, right? You're not going to find that on TikTok. Okay. And then the attachment repair, which I kind of talked about in the beginning of why that's so important, especially for the female nervous system, because we're so highly attuned to attachment needs, relationship needs, because we're so dependent on that oxytocin. A lot of our survival patterns in the nervous system are actually based on very early programming. We're talking 0 to 7 years old, all the way up. Your brain and nervous system really end the development around 24, 25. It's different for every person, but basically all those events and the programming that happens from 0 to 7 is super, super, super potent. But also 0 to 24, 0 to 23, 25, we're still changing and developing that brain. Okay, so they have huge impacts on how our nervous system is wired, not to mention our mother's nervous system, our grandmother's nervous system, our great-grandmother's nervous system, and everything that was built into that. And everything we're also taught societally about what it means to be accepted as being, for an example of female nervous system, being a woman, right? We could also apply that to males of what's acceptable as being a man. And that all goes into our survival physiology and how our nervous system works, because the nervous system sees relationships and being accepted as a survival motivation. So whether you like it or not, it will prioritize that. It will prioritize that, and it will find ways to do that, even if it's subconscious for you. So we have to rewire both of these systems, the attachment system, and we have to learn interoception as well. So as promised, I will chat a little bit about the female nervous system. I'm going to do another masterclass in October completely on the female nervous system and give us, space to talk about this and chat about this for ourselves and for people we work with and our loved ones. But I wanted to give you like a little bit of a sneak preview. So I already told you that the female nervous system relies on oxytocin. The male nervous system relies on dopamine. And if you know anything about dopamine, it's like our reward chemical. So it's all about achievement and competition and getting a task done. So it makes sense that the male nervous system revolves around dopamine, right? And the female nervous system around oxytocin. So it's more interested in relationality and connection, not just with others, but actually connection with ourselves as well. It's a cool thing about it. We can get oxytocin from inner connection as well, which is really cool. So what happens is most nervous system practices that we see out there, most methodologies and most research is done on the male nervous system. And it's done on dopamine based practices. So that's where you see things like the cold plunges being extremely popular, the really, really intense breath work, really intense exercise, dopamine, dopamine, dopamine. That will actually work really well for males. Okay, in general, not, I'm not trying to put everyone in the same bucket. But for females, a lot of times it's not going to work. So what we see is that the female nervous system goes through shifts throughout the cycle and also seasonal shifts. So as we go into perimenopause and menopause or even postpartum and pregnancy, our baseline HRV, that vagal tone, our stress resiliency level will actually change. So in certain phases of our cycle, in perimenopause and menopause, we actually have lower baseline HRV, lower baseline stress resilience. So we need to actually really, really, really prioritize caring for our nervous systems in our luteal phase, the second half of the menstrual cycle, during perimenopause and during menopause, because we're automatically going to have less stress resilience. We don't need really intense practices. We actually need practices that are slow and gradual and focus on relationality with ourselves and our bodies and relationality even with others. If we have a coach, if we have a therapist, if we have a women's circle, right? We need that. We need that for our nervous system. That's why women are more prone to going into the survival fawn-based response, right? Or prone to rather, because of that oxytocin need and our just responsiveness to oxytocin. And we're much more geared towards the social conditioning aspect, okay, to prioritize others' needs, wants, desires, suppress ourselves, but also suppress our stress, which is why you hear so many women, I'm not stressed, I'm not stressed, I'm not stressed, right? Until unfortunately the autoimmune diagnosis comes, the panic attack comes, the total breakdown comes. Oh, I guess I was stressed, right? And that is a failure. Unfortunately, we've never been taught interoception. We've never been taught how to interact with our own nervous system and our own body. We've actually been taught quite the opposite. Ignore all that. It's all up here. Make everything cognitive, make everything thought-based, make everything intellectual. And it's completely disconnected us from our ability to regulate and care for our own nervous system. Okay. So healing needs to include physiology, biology, and social conditioning of the attachment system as well for the female nervous system for long-term healing. Okay. Yeah, so before I get into this, any other questions or comments? I know some people have had to pop up because they had appointments, but anything I want to leave the door open for people to jump in with any questions up until this point. Comments? We're good. I think we're good. Okay. Mackenzie. So normal good HRV. It depends. What I would say with HRV is more so than having a standard HRV, what you want to do is you actually want to look at, like if you're working with a client long term, you want to look at kind of their starting point of the HRV. If you're working with a woman, it would be great if you get that at different points of their cycle, because you're also going to get to see, for example, what their average HRV would look like in a luteal phase versus a follicular phase, and then see how drastic those changes are. That's really important. You want to see how much also HRV is fluctuating. Okay, so that's a really good indicator as well, more so than just looking at a number and saying that's good. And the reason I say that is because the way we measure HRV is, depending on what you're using to measure it, it is still kind of in its more, I don't want to say primitive phrases, but it's not exactly 100% accurate. So we want to be really careful about getting just caught up with a certain number, if that makes sense. Um, And from that, more so looking at the own person's patterns, your client's changes throughout their cycle if they're a woman, and then also notice, oh, 1 week was it like their HRV completely tanked, and there was no clear reason other like if they were sick, that would make sense. But if it was just kind of random and they don't know why, like that's kind of a red flag that the HRV is just shifting around so quickly. Okay. Now, of course, if someone comes to you and they just line up with the symptoms of having a dysregulated nervous system, maybe they even have past trauma, and they have really low baseline HRV, then I think it can be, pretty safe to assume that that is like an issue for them. I know when it comes to like standard ranges, people will tell you if you're above 70 or above, that's really good. And whenever we're below kind of 30, we do in general start to get worried. But I would say everything in between that is more about the things I talked about, kind of tracking the changes, tracking it for the person throughout their cycle, tracking how they respond to certain things, more so than making a certain number. Okay. Yeah, I'm glad that was helpful. And yeah, and HRV is something we go in a little bit more in depth in the practitioner program. So anyone here who's interested in hearing about the practitioner program, I'm going to chat about that. We go more in depth on HRV as a measurement, what it works for, what it doesn't work for. And we also go into the female nervous system of how we expect HRV to change in different parts of the cycle, perimenopause, menopause, all that good stuff as well, if you're into HRV. But it's also not required, right? For people, it depends on how you work with people. Sometimes tracking it can make them really anxious. I always am big on this idea that we want to be careful about biometrics with people too, because sometimes just having that constant feedback is too much stimulation for the nervous system. So depending, it's kind of like a double-edged sword, right? Depending on who you're working with, how dysregulated they might be, you might make the determination that, actually, let's take a break, right? Let's take a break from Oura Ring, from biometrics, from tracking this for a month or 2 or 3 months or whatever it is. And I do that quite often with my clients. Okay. So I'm going to jump into this information, just respecting everyone's time. If we have more questions, I will stick around after to chat, but I want to just introduce you guys to my program, my practitioner program. This is going to be the second cohort. We had one in March of this year. The second one is starting October 7th. We still have more spots, inviting more people in, but there is limited spots because I do one-on-one work with everyone in the program. It's a mentorship program as well. So I can't just let in an unlimited number of people either. And basically, how I describe my methodology is a blend of soma, right? Soma means the body, listening to the body, science, and soul. I bring in that element of kind of the mystery of the soul and the spirituality as well. We look at weaving somatic practices, applied neuroscience, and integrative healing together. So I do bring in my background in integrative and functional health as well. And you gain a personal transformation through going through this process, but you also gain many, 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 many professional skills that are going to support you in whatever profession. As long as you work with humans, they're going to support you. If they're a parent, they're going to support you. If you're a health coach, a practitioner, we all have a human nervous system, right? And to me, I think the need to create this program became even more clear for me once AI started becoming so big, because I think it really brings the question to the table for practitioners, for coaches, for therapists of, what really makes you human? What makes you different than AI? Because AI is quite smart. I don't know if you've caught on to that by now. But as far as information goes, AI can do whatever PDF plans and supplements, and it can tell you all about all these theories. It can give you your own, 5-step plan. It can make it for you. But you know what it can't do? It can't be a human, and it doesn't have a human nervous system. And really, what I truly feel in my heart is that what's going to be some of the most important skills for any profession, but especially coaches and therapists and teachers and leaders, is being able to understand and attune to the human nervous system and work with that because it's something that AI is just not going to be able to do, right? We need another human nervous system to be able to respond, to witness us, to work with, and to truly understand what it means to be human. Okay, so it's more than just another skill set for me. It's really a deeper call into, what it means to be a helping and healing professional and really what it means to be human. Okay. And we will learn a lot of stuff. I have a full page on this on my website in case you guys want to go over the fine details of everything, but I'm just kind of previewing it here of all the different things, the different modules that we'll go over. Okay. And it also is going to include this time a bonus module on nervous system nutrition. So bringing in the role of when we're healing our nervous system, what nutritional practices, supplements can be really helpful, what ones maybe not, what things do we have to consider, all of that good stuff. We'll also have a bonus masterclass on fascia in the nervous system. Fascia is super interesting and important, connective tissue in our body. And you get 5 one-on-one coaching and integration sessions with me for like mentoring purposes and for your own process as needed. Starting at the end of this cohort in March, we'll start our monthly practitioner mentorship, where once a month we'll do basically master classes and Q&As like this, where we come together, we talk about what's coming up for us, for our clients, just as practitioners, as leaders, as curious humans who care about this stuff, we'll talk about it, we'll learn new skills, talk about new topics, talk about how to integrate it. Okay. Yeah. You guys for being here. Anyone who watches it back or who is watching live right now is eligible for a 20% discount. Okay, so you guys can use that code coach20. Or if you're watching it back, that's okay too. And that will be available up until the starting point of the course in a few short weeks here. So jump on it. I do offer one-on-one 20-minute free consultations. If you're thinking about it, but you're not totally sure, you can grab one of those on my website or bio and we can chat one-on-one about it. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Ellen. I'm so excited to have you. Ellen's gonna pop off, but she actually already signed up, so we're really excited to have her. Um, and you guys let me know, right? So I want to give the space for any questions here for those of us that are still on. Okay, I know a lot of people had to go. It's okay. It was a long master class. I will be sending the recording out so you can watch back. I know there was like a lot of information. Anyone who also would like the PowerPoint, send me a message on email, Facebook, or not Facebook, sorry, Instagram. Um, you can book a consult with me, whatever you want to do, but send me a message and I will send you the PowerPoint as well. Okay, if you want those notes, there's no problem. I can totally send you that. So that being said, before I take any questions for anyone who has to pop off at this point, thank you guys so much from the bottom of my heart for coming and for sharing, this time with me, for listening to my message. As you can see, and I hope you can feel, this is a mission for me. This is really what I feel I've been called to in a life purpose sense to share this information, specifically in the context of healing chronic illness, because I know that if I had never found out about this, I don't know where I would be now, right? I don't know where I would be now, and I don't know if I would be here with you guys. So it's so important to me. Whatever you take away from this today, that's amazing, right? Even if it's just a little bit of information, that's amazing. If you're watching this back, recording, that's amazing as well. You can always reach out to me. I'm always here to talk and chat about this stuff. And yeah, and I'll just stay on a little bit longer in case anyone else has any questions they want to chat about right now, live as well. Okay. So feel free. If you want to come off mute, anyone, you can come off mute. You can share anything or ask any questions. If not, that's okay as well. Okay. Thank you guys. Seeing all the messages in the chat. Thank you for coming, and I'm glad it was useful.
I
Thanks,
have
Dan.
I have
Yeah.
to say, sorry, I have to say, I do not know how I came to be like invited to this, but on my side, I'm calling it divine intervention because this was absolutely amazing.
Oh,
And literally like the basis of what I'm wanting to, teach and promote on my side of the business is so related to this, and like this element is huge. So just a quick background, like I myself in 2016 had my son was stillborn, and literally from there what would he was not born alive, but what was born was like this passion to help other women, and it didn't come instantly obviously, but I also had two other losses in 2019, much earlier along, but much the same. And it just always grew. And then there was, of course, some other trauma things that happened in my life that brought me to a lot of things, clean living and whatever. And so here I am now working really, really hard to develop, after doing the IHP courses, and really, really working hard to bring something to life for these mamas who want to get out of that grief and that fight or flight and that, those
yeah.
stages. Like I found myself feeling I would get so far and feel so happy, and then all of a sudden, something on my Facebook would come across about like being so down about loss, and I get that.
Yeah.
But like I just kept telling myself, there's got to be more. There's got to be something beyond this. Like I can't, how can anybody just keep living like this and just be stuck like this? And so anyway, here I am. And so thank you so much for like shooting me this like seemingly so random invite, but like this has
Yeah.
been so impactful. So
Yeah, Danielle, that means so much to me. And it means so much to me that you're here and stay in touch. I think
yes.
one of the biggest motivations of me creating this program and this space, and again, there's people who choose to do the whole practitioner program, but also just like these master classes and these spaces, is that we, as people who are also these helping and healing professionals and these leaders in the world, uh,
Yeah.
we get this information not only for the people we serve, but for ourselves as well. And
You're
that we
very
share
right.
that mission, and we support each other. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I will definitely stay in touch. I already connected with you on Instagram. Um, so I can, because I wanted the PowerPoint. So I found you over there.
That's fine. I will email you the PowerPoint. No worries.
Amazing.
No
Thank
date.
you. And I'm going to look at the website and see what this course looks like for me. So
Yeah,
thank you again so much.
absolutely. If you want to chat one-on-one, set up also a quick Zoom chat and we can do that as
Awesome. I will. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
well. So nice to meet you, Danielle.
You too. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Take care. Awesome. Okay, that's a wrap, guys.